Ilan. I don't know where she is on your screen, but we work together as waste minimization coordinators for the environmental center on campus. I don't know if you saw a poster, maybe you heard from a friend, but I'm sure you guys know we're joined today by Kaylee and Jen from the local organization Clever Octopus. They will be speaking about their store and how it addresses the intersections between art and reusable materials and different sources of waste that we don't often think about. Before we hear from them, Ilan will be speaking about greenwashing, also the different ways that large corporations are currently struggling to handle their waste, as well as examples of organizations that are working to redirect waste in meaningful ways. Then we'll hear from Clever Octopus and finish with the mask making session. Hopefully most of you were able to grab your masks, but if not, you're welcome to stick around. We'll keep chatting while we do that, or you can leave at that point. If any of you have questions during the workshop, you can jump in anytime, or you can also put them in the chat and we can address them that way. We want this to feel more like a conversation and less like a lecture. With that, I'll pass it to Ilan and Bridger, if you could pull up the first slide when you're ready.
Okay, so I'm Elon Jackson. Thank you guys for showing up today. I want to say thank you again to Clever Octopus for hosting this with us. Okay, next slide would work. Okay, so before we get into defining waste, I'd like to point out why we as consumers are so quick to support businesses whose waste streams go directly to landfills. America's had a close relationship with convenience shopping since the 60s, when one-stop shops began attracting customers with their promise of self-service and efficiency. Skip to today, in these shops, Walmart, Target, Kmart are facing accusations of producing more single-use plastics than this country and others know what to do with. However, instead of adopting less wasteful production tactics, these corporations have found ways to not lose the latest green phase supporters by embracing band-aid solutions. These include switching to paper or bioplastics and mainstreaming chemical recycling, or by placing the emphasis of saving the planet on consumers by encouraging recycling as the guilt-free way to purchase plastics and other recyclables. Multinational companies such as Nestle, Unilever, PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble, all companies that preach their use of biodegradable plastic or materials for their products, continue to harm the environment by using paper and crop-based bioplastic. The main issue with their use of materials is not their painfully slow transition to less harmful production tactics, but that these companies will lure in consumers to their products with the promise that they'll be supporting eco-friendly materials, when in reality, they're merely substituting single-use plastics for other throwaway materials. Although many of the largest contributors to the waste stream have recently begun releasing their 20-year plan that will end with their products being 100% waste-free, the claims don't do much to help the current waste crisis. While the environmental organization Greenpeace recognizes this slow transition to raising packaging standards among national brands as a step forward, they've also stated that in order to see actual change when it matters most, which is right now, these companies must eliminate unnecessary packaging and employ alternate delivery systems and new business models that preserve food without sacrificing safety or longevity. Regardless of these changes sounding drastic, they're necessary if the goals of these companies are quick and positive results, which the companies will also see environmental and financial benefits from. Next slide, please. Okay, so gaspillage is French for waste, and muda is a Japanese word meaning useless or waste as well. So this chart illustrates the different ways in which waste can be created during the production process. A lot of people view waste as the products left over from a consumer's use or the disposable parts to a purchase, such as packaging. However, waste is not just created after it reaches the consumer, but a lot of times more is created before it even makes the shelves. In production, if something's a waste, it doesn't mean it's trash or that it deserves to be thrown away. Generally, the specific action if the specific action doesn't change the function of the product, or if it's not done right the first time, or if the customer doesn't care about that process, not willing to pay for it, then it's considered a waste. Basically, if the time spent maintaining a certain production element doesn't eventually pay for itself or make a profit, it's considered waste. This means production line waste can be almost any material used in the production process, as long as its sacrifice means that the product was produced more efficiently and more value is being added to it. One of the more tangible forms of production waste comes from the struggle to maintain material inventory. When there is stored inventory, time can be lost while storing and fetching a product. Extra inventory can lead to defects from expiration and overproduction to a lack of space for storage. The waste of inventory and overproduction go hand in hand. If a product is being overproduced, it has to be stored somewhere, tying up space and requiring additional tracking and management. Depending on where the inventory is stored, it can also lead to wasted transportation and motion. And beside the obvious idea of unsold products sitting in a warehouse, the waste of inventory can be found in places like shelves of unused office supplies, too much bedside equipment in a hospital, stacks of promotional literature, perishable items that'll go bad before they're used or sold, or even applications on your desktop that you're never going to use. Next slide, please. So, what waste can be repurposed, and how do consumers, both individuals and businesses, go about taking pre- and post-production materials and using them to benefit secondhand consumers as well as the original producers? One of the more popular answers to this question at the moment is donating, with charity organizations or local thrift stores such as Goodwill, DI, PIBS, providing a space for consumers to donate clothing and items to that they consider waste. Thrift stores have become the guilt-free and often only easy recycling solution for many individual consumers. This is not the case, however. At thrift stores such as Goodwill and DI, only about 20% of the clothes donated are actually sold. These unpurchased donated clothes are then either taken to landfills or donated to other countries, which becomes dangerous when local textile workers are then competing with these donations. That's not to say that thrift stores are not an ethical place to shop and recycle, but commercial thrift stores are often misconceived as reuse organizations when they're actually not even able to reuse 3/4 of the materials that come to them. And the main controversy with thrift stores is that many people use donating and shopping at them as a way to justify overconsumption, but buying and donating is still consuming, which is essentially the same processes that thrift stores use. An example of actual reuse programs are food waste collection organizations. Next slide, please. And these are found in most major cities. Although still small numbers, these organizations work to divert food waste produced by restaurants or small food businesses, schools, from landfills to composting or other reuse programs. Westminster is actually working to implement a food waste diversion program where back-of-house food waste will be sent to the Wasatch Research Recovery, which is a local organization that converts the methane gas naturally generated by food waste into biogas, which is then converted to natural gas. Other waste diversion organizations for different forms of waste may target material businesses at the production level. So Materials Marketplace in Austin, Texas works to connect hundreds of businesses and community centers within the city to recycle and reuse unwanted materials. Through this connection, the company HomeAway, owner of 80 large defunct window shades from one of their Austin offices, connected with Austin Shade Works through the marketplace to reuse the fabric of all these shades. The event organization Production Glue diverts $10,000 worth of supplies each month to different businesses, communities such as local farms, museums, creative reuse centers, and community colleges around Austin. So this organization hasn't found a way to completely eliminate the waste from the waste streams of Austin's businesses, but it's begun to make the city's businesses more responsible for their waste before and after they're offered to consumers. And then another organization focused on reuse is Clever Octopus, who I'll pass the mic over to. And if anyone has any questions about any of the things I've just said, just pop them in the chat, or if you'd like to ask them right here, or listen.
All right, it's all you, Kaylee. Let me know when you're ready for the slides.
Yes, whenever you're ready to pull them up, if no one else has questions for now. Okay, and that takes us to our portion of this presentation tonight. Thank you, Elon, for a wonderful presentation. So yeah, thanks all for attending this workshop today. My name is Kaylee, and I'm the AmeriCorps Vista Program Coordinator for Clever Octopus. And I'm joined today by Jen Lopez, our Program Director, who will be teaching a mask making activity shortly after this presentation. And as previously mentioned, feel free to drop any questions and/or comments you may have in the chat at any point. So, who is Clever Octopus? Clever Octopus is a nonprofit organization founded in 2017, which is dedicated to fostering creativity and environmental awareness through the application of art, science, technology, engineering, and math. And we aim to serve folks in Salt Lake City by diverting gently used materials donated by individuals and businesses for artists, educators, and the community at large, which would otherwise be lost to landfills. We achieve this through our Creative Reuse Center and our Octopod mobile outreach vehicle. Additionally, we also focus on community outreach through youth and adult educational programming and workshops, kind of like this one, internships, volunteer programs, and community job training. And in the next slide, I'll be talking a little bit about what exactly creative reuse means and how we utilize our platform to galvanize change towards redefining trash. You can go ahead and change slides. Thank you. So, what is creative reuse, and how do we work towards reimagining what trash can be in order to allow for deeper collective environmental awareness? Digging ourselves out of the environmental catastrophe global consumerism created over the last few decades requires creativity and problem-solving skills. At times, it might quite literally require digging through the vast, immense amounts of garbage that overcrowds our natural resources. The life cycle of materials in creative reuse facility begins with donations from individuals, businesses, schools, and other community members. At Clever, these materials are sorted and priced by our warehouse staff and put out onto our shop floor, which folks can then purchase at an affordable price, making art supplies more accessible to our Salt Lake community. Ideally, we hope to empower others to give these materials new life after they leave our store, transforming a variety of objects into beautiful works of art and other practical goods. So what is creative reuse? The act of creative reuse is taking something unused or unwanted and turning it into something with functional or artistic value. While we hope that creative reuse encourages industry leaders and nations to reimagine the purpose of existing materials to decrease their environmental impact, we also understand how valuable creative reuse is in our everyday lives. Reimagining new ways to use items can solve shortages, decrease how much energy we use in creating new products, and decrease the number of things ending up in landfills and oceans. Next slide, please. So in terms of redefining trash, I invite you to think about things you've thrown away recently. Some common items you may encounter in living your everyday life might include bottle caps from water bottles, soda or kombucha caps, a disposable coffee cup, plastic bag from your latest trip to the grocery store, a well-used t-shirt, packaging from Amazon orders. The list goes on and on and on. If we're to shift our perspectives towards more sustainable consumption practices, we need to critically examine our relationship with these objects. How might we choose to define them and make use of them rather than throwing them in the trash after their short-lived use? And what can we do to transform our relationship with these naturally derived materials so that they receive new life rather than simply being thrown away? At Clever Octopus, we refute the word trash and work to redefine it actively, considering instead that every object has inherent value and purpose in our lives, especially through a creative lens. And these objects continue to inspire us of our innate creative power as human beings. Next slide. So here's an example of one way we might reimagine what might otherwise be considered devoid of practical use. A pile of fabric scraps, seemingly without any value, doomed to sit in a warehouse for years on end, potentially, along with buttons, fabric straps, and a little sprinkle of imagination allows for wonderful works of art to take shape. Next slide. So what do we do in the community? We work to serve a vast community base in Salt Lake City by extending our tentacles out to reach artists, families, teachers, nonprofits, and other initiatives in the community. One initiative we have is called the Nonprofit Rewards Program. So for every $5 purchase that consumers spend in our store, they get $1 to put towards their choice of several nonprofits, including Clear Spectra, Wonder Bloom Nature School, Wasatch Community Gardens, the Humane Society of Utah, and us as well. Nonprofits can then come in and purchase supplies with the funds that they've accumulated. Another initiative we have is called Craft for a Cause. So in January 2020, we partnered with animal rescue crafters to host crochet and sewing workshops to create medical care goods for rescued wildlife in Australia in response to the catastrophic bushfires. Handcrafted products included knitted and crocheted pouches for baby kangaroos and swaddling wraps for bats. At the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic last March, we rallied crafters to sew face masks and PPE for healthcare workers. So volunteers used mask templates manufactured by the nonprofit Make Salt Lake, consisting of upcycled donated materials from Clever. And later that spring last year, we hosted an art supplies donation drive launched by the Native Youth Arts Initiative to donate 161 pounds of materials, including school supplies for youth and families of the Navajo Nation. So to date, we have diverted over 137,000 pounds of waste ending up in landfills, which is pretty incredible. And in 2019, we've gained more capacity to do what we do by relocating from a 1,700 square foot space to an 11,000 square foot space, which gives us more capacity to do incredible work. Next slide. So these are just some pictures of folks that we serve, local artists. In the bottom left is a family from the Navajo Nation receiving supplies. In the center is a teacher from Wonder Bloom Nature Preschool, which is a part of our nonprofit rewards program. And to the right is our Craft for a Cause with the Australian bushfire marsupial critters. Next. And these pictures date back from our Craft for the Cause with the Native Arts Youth Alliance in 2020, as well as folks from Big Brothers, Big Sisters, who are a few recipients, among other organizations, to receive a total of 19,000 masks that we received as a donation to our warehouse. Next. And here is a picture from our 2019 annual report that sums up well the work that we've done. So in 2019, we've diverted over 40,000 pounds of waste, recruited 215 volunteers accumulating over 8,000 hours. And we've put together 1,800 events with over 17,000 participants. Next. And so as we wrap up this presentation, I would just like to thank you all for listening, and I encourage you to check out our website and our shop if you haven't already. You never know what you're going to find there, and there's so much to explore, and it's so incredibly easy to get lost in a good way. So yeah, at this point, I'll open up the discussion more to allow for any questions that y'all may have. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us by our email if you have any questions that come up. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Kaylee. And I just do want to say that me and Elon went by to pick up the mask kits, and we did get very lost in your store. We came out with like earrings and stickers, and it was incredible. So I encourage everyone to check it out. And I don't know, does anyone have any questions, anything that came up or thoughts? John, do you want to speak to your question? John's my dad. And he can't unmute. I think he's just curious a little more as to the process through which you receive your materials.
Yeah, we receive donations from all over the community, businesses that have too much of one thing, or they have materials that are misprinted. One company that I'm thinking of is called Freeform, which has given us tons of these acrylic squares that are misprinted, and I believe they're for like furniture, and they're like custom orders, and they're just not like, they're not exactly as how like the custom orders are supposed to be, or they're like slightly off, and they don't have a purpose for them, so they have linked up with us to give them all of their extra stuff. I'm sure Jen can speak more to everything that we've received throughout the years.
Those tiles in particular they're sample pieces. Normally what they produce is a 4x8 foot sheet of their material. It's a material that once you start to see it, you'll recognize it being in like every doctor's office and every dentist's office everywhere. And we actually play a game at this point where we're spotting them Freeform in the wild. And so these are the sample pieces that they prepare to send out places when they, send out their catalog or whatever it needs to be. This might be discards, it might be an overrun, it might be an end of this particular leafy product that's embedded in there, and they'd switch to a different leafy product, so it's a different look. But they give us, when Kaylee says tons, we mean literal tons of these materials. So we get 4x4 inch squares, we get 8x8 inch squares, and we get as big as 2 foot by 4 foot pieces and 4 foot by 4 foot pieces. So you can use them for building lots of cool stuff like countertops and small cabinets and all sorts of other neat projects along the way. And we've actually seen some very fancy chicken coops coming from the folks who are finding these supplies.
Yeah, I know one of our shop employees also made a planter, I believe, out of them by just arranging the squares together and using hot glue. It's really cool. Yeah, it's super durable material as well. I have a piece of it somewhere. But yeah. Go ahead.
Is there ever a point when Clever Octopus has to divert the materials that Clever Octopus collects? Like, is there ever like too many materials at some point?
Yeah, we do have materials that can't go out because they just won't sell. Or yeah, sometimes we have materials that sit for a long time and nobody really wants them. So we either find another purpose for them, or we need to throw them out, or they just go elsewhere. But yeah, that we do run into that at times. But
For
we
the
try
most
to
part,
make use of everything
yeah.
that we have.
We try to make sure that we're only taking what we think we can use and what we can move to the community. We do actively recycle a lot of stuff, like the boxes and things that things come in. But as it stands, our waste stream is still shockingly small for a thrift store that takes in as many pounds as we do, both in our trash and our recycling. We try to make sure that we can use just about everything that comes in the door. Right now we have what's called a Gaylord, which is like a pallet-sized pallet, so it's a 4-foot cube of textile scraps that are, you know, smaller than the pieces that you've got for your mask here. And you've got my mom texting me. And so we've got so much of that stuff that we are developing projects that we can use those teeny tiny scraps for as well. So that we're able to say, okay, well, these aren't useful for sewing anything. Nobody's going to want to quilt this many quilts to be able to use up this much trash fabric. But what else can we use it for? It's going to go sit in a landfill otherwise. So maybe we can use it as stuffing for a new cushion. And you'll be seeing some of that stuff showing up in our reuse shop soon, and on Instagram soon.
I'm curious, I think, Jen, you've been around since the very beginning at Clever Octopus, I think. Is that true? Slash maybe your co-founder, is that also true? So I'm curious, you know, what was the sort of the moment that inspired, you know, you to do this, to say, wow, this is a need, like, let's make something happen?
I had been to school in a town that had a shop like this. They were based on, so they were, you know, 20 something years old at the time that I was there. And they were based on a shop in Australia called Reverse Garbage that was like 40 something years old at this point. And so now the Reverse Garbage is over 50. Scrap Exchange in Durham, North Carolina is, I think, almost 30 at this point. They're 25 or 30. And there are a ton more of these organizations that have sprung up in various cities over the country. But the moment that I got to Salt Lake, I realized that we didn't have any of these super weird little thrift stores that I had found in California, like the ones where, like, you know you found a good thrift store if they sell used underpants. You don't want to buy the used underpants, but you know that they're taking everything and they're really trying to maximize everything that they've got. And that's where you start to find a lot of really cool and curious treasures. And I couldn't find those sort of thrift stores here. And I couldn't find anything that was selling like bits and pieces, because sometimes you just need bits and pieces to do what you do. And so the moment I arrived in Salt Lake, that was kind of one of the things that I started seeing a need for. It took a decade to pull it off, but that was one of the key things that I knew we needed. Having had that experience with a store like this, and having kind of grown up in a world where like we saved every single little tidbit. Like my dad grew up in Cuba, so you wouldn't just like go to the store to buy a part for the car. You would have to find a car that had that part. You would have to salvage it, or you'd have to know how to manufacture that part. And so that meant that, like, to this day, we still have, you know, El Camino radio knobs for a car that they sold before I was born. But, you know, what if we need one? What if we need one? I know where to find one.
I'm curious what, like, because it's like a creative reuse kind of place, right? And so I'm assuming you might get a lot of artists that come. Are there any other like kinds of customers that come for looking for specific stuff that you typically see?
Are you asking, like, who are the demographics?
Yeah.
And yeah. I think from what I've seen, we have definitely a lot of artists, but we also have a lot of folks who are new to making things. We have a lot of folks who are like, you know what, I haven't really done this thing, but I'd like to try it. We have a lot of school teachers. We have a lot of science instructors in a lot of areas that you kind of wouldn't necessarily guess would be the right folks to show up. Summer camp, for sure, definitely comes to see us. Individuals homeschooling, for sure. And really, the best thing is when you see, like, you know, in the before times, when you see in the before times, like you would see whole families come in, and then you'd see like a kid running around super excited, like, oh my goodness, they have this, what is this? And then they like start playing with it right away. And the parents are like, I don't quite get it, but apparently this is fun. And then they start to see the magic on their kids' faces, because the kids totally know what creative reuse is. Sometimes it takes a hot minute for adults to figure out what it is again, and to kind of reset their brain back into that childlike wonder of, it doesn't have to be what I'm told it is, and it can be all sorts of other things too. As far as do builders and chicken coops and so forth on there, I'm quite serious when I say chicken coops have happened from many of our materials. I don't have.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we going to split into breakout rooms, or are we a small enough group that we think we can do it together?
I think let's stay together, yeah, and then definitely, if folks wanna chat, and think of this more as like, now we're just sharing a space and making something, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So for the portion of the sewing, I've got a little bit of a cooking show situation going on here. I've got 4 different masks in various stages, so you can see what's what. Let me finish this little row right here. Okay. Started about 10 seconds earlier than I thought it would. So ultimately, what we're making is this mask. It's an adjustable ear loop, and it fits nice and snugly, and it is a 2-layer mask. I'm gonna put the headphones back on so I can hear y'all. What's cool about it is that while it effectively pretty neatly shapes to your face and fits really snugly over your face, it is actually just made from these 2 squares, no cutting involved, which is really fun. There's one slight difference from how I put this one together to what we're doing here, but it's no big deal. It'll be good. Yeah. And the other thing is that it's not contingent on like the awesomeness of your perfect and beautiful stitches, because it's going to be all hidden inside the fold. So we're good to go for making this happen. Let me grab the sheet again, because I just changed tabs, so that I can make sure that I don't explain things in ways that I didn't write down. One sec. Okay. So you should have an instruction sheet. You'll have 2 pieces of fabric. 2 pieces of fabric, you have a needle and thread, and you've got some pieces of t-shirt, right? A lot of times when I teach sewing workshops, we've got folks who aren't even quite sure how to thread a needle correctly and how to tie it off, so I want to make sure that we go through that stuff too. And what we're doing, because I'm running cooking show style, I have so many pieces in front of me. You're going to unroll a piece of thread that's about as long as like your fingertip to your shoulder. That's plenty. It's going to be too much, and that's okay. And snip that. And then you'll take the tip of your thread, and easiest way to thread a needle, especially if it's got a small eye, put it in your mouth, get a little spit on the very end of it. It's your mask, it's fine. You'll poke that right through that hole. That's the easy part. The thing we want to make sure is that we don't want to have a knot at the needle end of things, because then we'll end up tangled, we'll end up with a stopper, we'll end up running into bumps of things. And we don't want to not have a knot at the other end, because we won't have a place to end the thing out. So at the other end, and not like you're going to see it, you're just going to see my hands kind of miming the whole situation. I've got, it's there, but you can't quite tell. I've got both of my threads, and I've got them lined up to the same height. I'm going to pinch them together. So my needle's over here on this end, and I've got this with loose tails. I'm going to tie a loose overhand, which is just like your shoe tying knot. There you go. You can kind of see them right there. And we are going to pull on this tail so that that overhand knot locks down like maybe a ½ inch or so from the end of our thread. That one's an inch. It doesn't really matter. It's going to be okay. Does that like kind of track? Can you kind of see what's happening?
I got lost for a second searching for scissors, which may have happened to other people. So I'm threaded with my needle, and then where did you tie the overhand? Was that the other end of the string?
Yep, where the tails are. And I got another one I can show you because I'm doing it cook and show style. It's so much easier to teach this way. So I thread. Oh, that's got a little eye. Okay, so my needle is up top. He's going to go off screen up top. This time my tails match up. And I'm going to tie my knot, tie them together about a 1/2 inch from those tails.
Gotcha. So you're pulling the threaded end way through until they're even.
Yep, until they're even.
Sweet.
Yeah. And by doing it this way, you set yourself up for a lot more success in the next few minutes. I've seen a lot of people try to tie their knots in other places, and then they get frustrated when you hit the speed bump of the whole situation. Okay, so we've got a threaded needle. Some of your fabric may have a right side and a wrong side, like this one. That was clearly the wrong side because that bright color is the right side. So we call the bright side the right side, and the dull side is called the wrong side. You can see that again on this piece here. Some of your fabric may not have a distinct right and wrong. So like this one, this is the right side, and this one's considered the wrong side. And really the way you can tell is that this is more likely to get snagged and damaged. That's all you know there. And if you've got like just a plain solid, like the green on this one, it's going to be green solid on both sides, and there is no right or wrong to it. So you can do as you please. So if you have fabric with specific sides to it, you want to sandwich them so that they are right sides together. So here you can see my sandwich. My squares aren't totally perfect, and that's okay. This is a really forgiving project, and we designed it to be this way. But you can see that I have wrong sides out right now. Okay. And this is a kind of wrinkly bit, but it's all good. All your pieces should be relatively square, but it's okay if they're not. Because again, like it'll all fold together and sort itself out. Okay. So with your needle threaded and your edges lined up roughly, you want to pick one side and poke your needle through. Just make one poke through. And you're going to see that you're coming up on that knot, and just leave it hanging so that you've got probably like a little loop sticking out there still. See if you can see him kind of. I tried to move the lighting so this would make a little more sense. And so I poked down this time. So I'm going to poke back up. We're basically doing just an up, down stitch. But we're doing one clever thing to make our knot pretty secure. So I've done an up and a down and an up. And I have a little space before my knot right there. And I want to take my needle and go into that little hole of that knot. So I can really catch that bad boy. And now I've made a really secure loop involving that first knot that we tied. This is the hardest part of the sewing part. I promise. From here, it's literally up, down, up, down. Okay. I'm gonna lay my stuff flat here again. Pretty flat is good enough. You can see that one of my pieces of fabric is pretty wrinkly, and I chose a pretty wrinkly piece so I can make the point that this is okay. We can sort this out. From here, you're gonna stab your needle in, see if you can see it from that side, about every 1/4 inch, down, back up, and down, and up. And you can see that I'm gathering a few stitches on my needle before I pull through. It's faster, it's easier, it's neater, it's less frustrating. You don't get your thread tangled as much. It's just the way to do this. And then once I've got a few stitches in place, I will pull my thread through. So now we are looking like that. Just an up, down so far. What you got? I see a confused face. If you've got questions, unmute yourselves and just like jump in here. Okay. Otherwise, I assume that you're good to go at this point. So again, more up, down, until you get to the other end. Roughly every 1/4 inch, but like you're literally never going to see these stitches. These are on the inside of your mask, like inside, between the layers. Nobody will know that we learned how to sew on this row. You can see I'm kind of making these little pinchy gathers as I do up, down, up, down. And I've got enough on my needle, so I will pull that through like that. Oh, too snug, so I back it up by pulling just on the fabric itself until it's flat. It's nice and forgiving. And then we'll be approaching the end here in just a moment. Ooh, made that one real close. It's okay. All right, let me show you how to tie this thing off. So once you get to your end, you've got your up, downs all the way across, and you've got your dangly needle friend at the end. You can see where it's hanging right there. Take your needle, take the eye of it, which is the part that has the thread through it. It's a little rounder, so it makes this next step easier. Poke that eye into and underneath the last stitch you made. And then you just kind of want to keep tying knots. And you're not going to do it right, and it's okay, because as long as you tie a lot of pieces, it's good to go. I think it's a Boy Scout joke that says if you can't tie a knot, tie a lot. That's what we're doing here. We're good enough. We're going for close enough. If you know fancy knots, then by all means tie fancy knots. But for our purposes, we're just going to like loop it around some stuff and poke it back through some holes until you get something that holds. And it will be totally fine. And if it doesn't hold, then you just go back and put another stitch in it later. Because now you know how to sew. Okay. Do you all have your first side stitched up?
Yes.
Fantastic. So now we repeat on the other side so that you end up with both like two opposite edges, like here, that have the stitchy friends on them. So same idea with setting up your thread. Same idea with that first knot and getting the whole system ready to go. I'm going to tie off this, and then I will answer more things. You know, maybe it's a knot, could be not a knot. So our goal for this step, in a second, you will have basically a tube. Once you get the other side stitched up, it'll look like that. How are y'all doing so far? Good? Okay.
Good. Just finishing up the
Fab.
tail end here.
Okay, I'm going to catch up on my next piece of my Martha Stewart situation here, so I got all of them in the same place. For me, it's actually a whole lot easier to lay this flat on my table or my desk here rather than hold it up into the screen. You may find that that is easier. The point of setting up this project like this is we often see like all of these classes, all of these projects, all of these like, you could totally make this if you have 9 million skills and $40 billion and all of the things that are the fanciest and the nicest. And everything has to be perfect and fit together. And so what we designed this time for this project is we wanted to make it really clear that this is a project that's really forgiving and totally approachable, even with learning the skill at the same time. We can see that our fabric isn't perfect. We can see that some of them aren't the same exact size. They're close enough. And we can see that we are still figuring out how to stitch all these pieces together. Like I just sewed one that I didn't even have the right length thread for. How many of these have I made? I have no idea, but I didn't even measure my thread right. What? And so being empowered to take a look at a pile of fabric scrap and say, oh, inside that pile of fabric scrap, I see loads of supplies for making hundreds of masks. Really kind of starts to shift your thinking on what is all this discarded stuff. And that's kind of what we were talking about a little bit ago, where most of the game of being part of Clever Octopus world is that paradigm shift of how to do stuff, how to see stuff differently, how to quit seeing the things that we have, how to quit seeing the waste material that we produce as trash or not trash, but rather like, what are the remaining material properties here and how can I apply this to my world?
I think
So that's,
oh, so sorry.
yeah, go ahead. That's go ahead.
I think early in the presentation, either you or Kaylee mentioned you all donated a bunch of masks maybe earlier on in the pandemic. Was it kind of like these masks, cloth, or was it?
19,000 would definitely not this. Those were misprints. So like the companies that were manufacturing masks, once like real businesses got in on it, we donated tons of mask making materials, like, you know, the first week of March when everything was closed, quite literally. And that was very exciting and empowering because we got to get things out to county buildings and government buildings and so forth that were just like in desperate need of any sort of PPE at that moment. But the ones that we got later were misprints once the megacorps got into the whole situation and like the logo wasn't right, or like the dye sublimation was off, or the color, right? Like things that didn't affect the fact that it was definitely a face covering, but you know, they couldn't deliver them to their original recipients.
Right.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, you would be, I think that it's more horrifying than you could possibly imagine to find out what all really is in waste streams. And like, that's my favorite thing to do is go poke around behind a business and see what actually is in their trash, to go see what it is that they don't use anymore. Dumpsters are fascinating. They tell you a lot about what a business does, what their values are, and how do they incorporate themselves as part of a community. So like sometimes, and I don't know exactly what we've got here, but I know that there's somebody who, I think they call themselves a trash walker on Instagram, who goes and pokes around in New York City in various, you know, like a CVS dumpster, and is just like shocked at the sort of stuff that's in there. It's like stuff that expires in 3 days, or like the box is dented, but it's totally viable, and they're frustrated, but instead of just being annoyed, they, you know, gather all the stuff and they send them off to, you know, shelters and whoever else needs that stuff. The craziest thing I have found corporations throwing out. We matched up with a big corporation who was moving their operations, and it was the original company was a German company, and they had merged with another one. So they were moving their Salt Lake manufacturing facility to somewhere in the Midwest. And we had gone to pick up like a thing, And then we found out that they had, a literal, 100,000 square foot warehouse full of things that they were not shipping off to their new location. And so we were told, please take as many of the things as you possibly can. Whatever you don't take is going into a dumpster. And we're like, you can't mean into a dumpster. And they're like, no, we're just gonna shove it off the loading dock into a dumpster. And we ended up taking thousands of pounds of equipment and tools and like forklifts and that sort of stuff. Pallet jacks, not real forklifts, but pallet jacks. And a lot of the furniture from the shop, some furniture in our shop right now, all of our sewing machine tables, a couple of industrial sewing machines, and a ton of other stuff that was literally getting shoved into a dumpster when we didn't take them. And the thing is that I don't think that that's remarkable at all. I think that's what just happens. It costs too much to ship that stuff to their next location. It's more readily replaced elsewhere. Like they would have no reason to disassemble the shelving and salvage that and ship it, halfway across the country. And they couldn't get rid of it all fast enough on KSL. They just had to be down and out of there. But yeah, like literal thousands of pounds. There's another one that's a craft company. When things go, into their dead stock. Emmy will send you the mask. When the craft company gets rid of their dead stock, when they decide, you know what, this is not quite the shade of pink we'd like to use this year. It goes into dead stock, it goes into back stock, and whatever never got shipped out stays with them at their distribution center. And every few years they have a massive clearance sale, and that's wonderful. But the things that don't get sold at their clearance sale, when it's time for that thing to be closed down, get tossed. We went in at the end of one, and I think it was early 2017, and we got 9,000 pounds, and we didn't make a single dent. You couldn't have told visibly that we took anything from that place. It was pretty wild. Okay. Tubes.
Yes.
Fab. So we have a tube. So you take your tube and you turn your tube right side out. So you're back to the pretty colors. We are here in our pretty colors of our tube. Ta-da. And I'll turn my other one because we're doing the Martha Stewart thing. But, showing you how a sausage is made. So we've got them all flattened out. Stick your hands inside, kind of lay them, relatively flat. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're not stitching at that point. But you'll take those edges and kind of smoosh them out here. If you want to get real fancy, you put one hand inside of your tube, and let's see that. There's not enough height for you to see it. I'm putting one hand inside my tube, and I'm kind of shoving it to an edge, and then I'll smush as if I'm ironing, but with my hands. It's good enough. That's all we really need. We just need to be able to see what's going on. Same thing, pull it out, smoosh. You can see that it totally made a difference. It's definitely flatter. And that was literally the hand iron that you just saw. So that works. So the next step is we're gonna make one of our top or bottom seams. And here is what we're aiming for. So you're gonna have this guy right here. You're gonna have your ear loop tail sticking out of one side for right now. I promise it'll all work out, but it's gonna be a little tricky for just a second. So I think that your loops are these 9-inch things, right? Is that what y'all have? Find where I put all my stuff. Here we are. They're about 9 inches long. Is that about right? About the same size as your mask? Okay. So inside your tube, you want to dangle one of those friends into there and push it over to the edge and leave it sticking out about 1 inch. I am wearing dark colors and the contrast is not good here. Okay. But you can see there it is, like that. Okay. And then the same thing on the other side, laying that down. And at that point, the dogs are definitely trying to steal some dinner. And now we need to decide which side we want to be the inside and the outside. So on this one, I chose the white side is my outside and the green is my liner, which means I'm going to fold everything towards the green. I'm folding towards the liner. For the bandana one, I think I want bandana on the outside. So I'm going to fold it towards the white. So you can see I'm going to kind of line up these edges close enough. And I'm going to fold it towards the white. So right now you are on the inside of my mask. Okay. And again, you want to kind of hand press that down. You fold it about a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch, whatever you're feeling. Again, it's all pretty adaptable. It's still going to be a face covering. It's still going to be great. Okay. All right. And you want to thread your needle once again. Same way that we're tying the knot, same whole fun thing. Same amount of thread and everything. That's part of the magic of sewing squares. Everything's the same length. Okay. Okay, so I've got my needle and thread here. I've got this folded over. I'm telling you the hand press thing works, and then of course the one that I'm doing is not going to hold because it's just being rude like that. Okay, so we're here. We've got that. I've got my needle in the other hand, and again, like definitely do these in a direction that faces you, and it's a lot easier. And when I stitch through, the really important thing here is that I do not want to stitch through my strap because this is going to be on a slide, but we'll get there in a second. So what I'm stitching through are 4 layers of fabric, the 2 pieces that I folded and the 2 pieces that were already there, but definitely not through my strap. So I poke my first hole, and you know what? It's going to be like a 1/2 inch away from the edge because it's all okay. You can see right there's my needle. You can see that it's not near this piece over here at all. It's not going to accidentally catch it. I'm going to poke through once. I'll bring it back up and doing the same thing that we did on the last one to catch that knot. We'll do that again. And again, it's okay if your stitches aren't perfect because this folded in stuff is on the inside, so only you have to ever see that. So that's fun. Okay. From here, got my needle, I've got my fancy knot and my loop through knot, and I'm just going to sew up, down, once again. About a 1/4 inch size stitches. Same way as we did before. Make a few up, downs, and then pull your thread through. And I've got to keep laying it down because gravity to straighten everything back out, but you should be able to make this happen pretty straightforward.
Okay, quick question.
Yep.
We're putting the shirt tube, the bandy thingy in the tube, and then folding over the open side. The tube. Okay.
Yep. So what you'll end up with is like this. You can see that these, I don't want to pull them all the way up because then I got to rethread them. But you can see that these little threads or those little pieces here are loose and they're not part of the stitch right there. And it's like a little bit messy at that corner, but again, once we scrunch it, when we pull the mask up together, you will never know because you can't see that on here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then when you get to the other end, you'll stop again, like about a ½ inch out. If it's 3/4, that's fine too. Again, nobody's gonna know. Even on the black one where I've got blue thread, like from the distance that you're looking at this right now, which is like a foot, you still can't see what's going on. So it's fine. Nobody's gonna know. And if they do, you say, you know what? I sewed this myself out of trash. So there. And then they'll be, you know, either stoked or curious, or well, at least you have a story to tell. Okay, tie off my quarter here.
Do you usually just get fabric from individuals, or can you pick some up from like sewing stores nearby, from Vans or something?
I'd say that we are truly terrified of hitting up these sewing stores for their scraps. They're pretty good about selling off their roll ends, their bolt ends, their pieces, their remnants, but invariably they're going to have something left behind. I think that what they have left behind is an incredible quantity of stuff. And I don't know that I want all that yet, because I'm not sure that we're ready to process that. But sewing people are funny in that they, like, buying fabric and sewing are completely separate hobbies.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like, you know, like you buy fabric with the intention of sewing something, but everybody who sews things has several lifetimes worth of fabric, if they have anything other than like absolutely perfect self-control. And so, you know, every so often folks will go through and clean out their stash, and there's that. We do get upholstery rolls pretty regularly from, you know, upholsterers, interior designers, and so forth. We get lots of upholstery samples, which there's a million possible uses for that. Kaylee's got some cool projects in the works right now involving upholstery samples. And, you know, there are lots of ways to use those things. We recently got a whole lot of spandex rolls that sold like hotcakes, because I don't know if they were making like ice skating costumes or what the deal was, but there was just like the most amazing rainbow of sparkly neon wonders that like we could barely keep them in the building. Okay. Once you get to this point, hold your friend up. I'm going to thread my needle once more because we have one more set to sew. So if you're done and waiting for everybody, go ahead and rethread that needle. Same way, same amount, same knot. Hooray for squares. So fun fact, we've actually already done the hardest possible thing that we can do on here, and that's figuring out how to insert those straps without stitching them down. So all we're doing again on this next batch is we're going to find those little tails and scrunch them down just enough so you can see the new tail on the other side. So you can get some contrast there. So you can see there's my original tail down here. There he is. And then there's a new one up at the tippy top. Because we're not doing any fancy or formal gathering on how to make this thing lay nicely, the friction of where you've got that thing right now should be enough to hold it in place. Right? Like it's kind of wadded over here and it's all okay. But now we can see that we're turning into a mask. If you really were concerned about it, you could go ahead and tie your tails together, just so you can keep the whole system controlled, but you don't have to. So I'll do one with and one without, so you can just keep an eye on those two ways of doing it. And the only difference between what we're doing here and what I wrote is that I started with longer t-shirt strips that I plan to cut down once I got done with it, just to keep from having to think through this stuff. But we're good. So now I've tied off my ear loops without having stitched the last thing. And as you can guess, up here on this open end, we are going to fold it over and we're going to stitch just like we did on the other end. So again, folding it toward the side that you want to be your inside. So on mine, you can see there's my little red edge because I'm folding this with white on my inside. Line up the things, pinch it, fold it over a ½ inch. Does this make sense? Oh yeah, that shows it pretty nicely on there. Like that. And then I'll stitch another up, down, running across here. Again, making sure not to catch the straps along the way. Yeah, that's right, Bridger.
It feels like I've got a lot of tension in my system.
Oh, I tied my knots really, really close to the end.
Okay.
There's that. That might be where your challenge is. You can also just kind of like pull it slightly, or you can just start stitching it and then dig back in and fish it back up. That might work too. Or you could even take your needle and thread and stitch the tips of the thing together if you're not getting your knot small enough or far enough from the edges.
Hmm.
A few different approaches based on your favorite knots and skills. When we finish all this, can we take a Zoom selfie of everybody wearing their fancy new masks?
That sounds great.
That would be really fun. As cheesy as they are, I still really love the Zoom selfies.
It's gonna define the era.
Right? Like, oh, look at us, we're still the Brady Bunch.
They started like incorporating Zoom into like commercials and TV shows, and
Oh my.
it's becoming just so regular. Strange.
It's so strange, and yet I still meet with, so I still tutor math and ACT prep, and I still meet students who are like, okay, so I have to download Zoom, and how do I, and I'm like, seriously, how have you, a high school student, made it 1 year into this, and you are just now, today, downloading Zoom? Yeah, baffling. On the upside, it's a whole lot better than many of the other apps we used before. So there's that.
Yeah, I saw something a while back that was like making fun of Skype for having a 20-year head start and still losing.
Right, yeah. You know what? I am going to stitch these loops. And really that just means I'm going to layer them together, and I'm going to put a couple up downs on them and call it good enough. Tie some knots. There are fancy things that you could do, including you can include a nose wire on your next round of this by straightening out a paper clip and rounding over the ends with just like twisting a little loop at the end. And you'd put it right there at the tippy top between your thread and the edge of the seam, or the edge of the fold, if you wanted to have an even fancier mask. So if you try it on, you find that the knot does not fit, then you can see here's my stitched together version. I'm not sure if I can get the camera to focus on that, but you can at least see the tail of thread hanging out above there, where that seems to be a good solution to that question. I have an enormous head. If you do not have an enormous head, then you might not have that issue, and tying knots might be your best bet. It would, regardless, make sure that you shift all the bits around so that the knots or the seam or however you set it up doesn't end up hanging out behind your ears, just because that's not fun. Our ears don't need anything else hanging on them. All right. There it is. That works. Even on my giant head. Here we go. It's a pretty good size mask. It fits pretty closely. Like, the only thing really that I can think of that I would do differently if I were making these for all of my use, just because I already have a couple dozen that I made that I like. If I were making this for my everyday uses, I'd make sure to put that nose wire in there. But because of that fold, it seems to have enough stability that it holds down right now. Like, it's not fogging my glasses even as we're talking right now, which is kind of cool. Yay, Emmy! You've got the matchy-matchy to this one.
Cute. I find that these masks are good for double masking too. They have more space. Like other masks I've tried to use just feel suffocating. So these are a little bit more roomy, which is nice.
Yeah, a friend had sent me one that was, basically this design but a little more shape. And it was like, oh my goodness, that is enormous. And then I put it on over my giant, humongous N95, and I was like, oh, actually, good job, Danny. You did this absolutely perfectly. So that definitely helped the inspiration for this design. And you can hear the puppy having a grand old time in the background. So fun fact, all of your mats are made from fabric that was in our too big to go away scrap, but too small to be sold on the regular shelves. So when we talk about reducing textile waste, which is one of the biggest things that end up in our landfill in the first place, you are actively reducing textile waste right here. It is stuff that was just barely making the cut, but not necessarily going to go and be very useful otherwise. Yeah. Wait, which one is that? I don't recognize that fabric. It's a good one.
This actually was from fabric that I got in the store. It's a little bit
Okay.
different.
There we go. I knew there was a huge pile. I couldn't remember that pattern. But I had made some of the other ones out of something that's really similar to that. I like this stitched together ear loop situation. It seems to be a nice one. And it also gives me a little more working room. Does everybody have theirs finished?
Looks like McKenna's still doing a couple stitches.
Okay.
I think now's a great time to ask any final questions, or if you have lingering things, and then I'll stop the recording and we can take a Zoom selfie if everybody's down.
Yay. Big picture, if there is something that you are working on that requires the acquisition of things, come see us, because we probably have your things. Whether that's like posters or presentations or like, who knows what you're working on, but we probably have the thing, or we have something that could do the job, and it would be cool and unique, and then people would be like, oh my goodness, I never thought of doing it that way. I think that we're wonderful. Because I can.
What's the weirdest thing y'all have received that you've turned into something?
Oh man.
Wackiest my thing.
There are so many weird things. Let's see. We've got a crate full of visors for bike helmets, like those weird, like they're like pronged and they're like a super bright neon green. We're hoping to incorporate those into a project coming up soon that Kaylee's working on. We regularly get the pipette boxes from science labs. We call them science grids because it's good enough for explaining what we're up to, but they are like, they're about index card sized, and they have these little holes in them with 40, 50, 48, some nice 2 to the whatever power box of little circular dots on them that we use for teaching greenhouse making. Actually, we use them for sprouting. I think we're sprouting wheatgrass in there right now, and those are a fun lesson. There are, I don't know, man. You kind of walk through there and you think, huh, I never thought about those sorts of things, or I didn't know we made that here, or any other sorts of reasons for discards. And it's kind of cool to see that there's a really broad array of businesses who are getting on board with this whole, like, I probably shouldn't throw this away because it's probably useful somehow. And how is it useful? I don't know, but that's what those people will figure out. Ken is still doing some stitches. Okay. Shar, done and beautiful. Amazing. I would love to see Shar if you're willing to share. Also, I'm really slow at checking the the chat. Amazing! It looks so good. And also with your background, it's like the contrast and the colors is just so good. It's so good. I picked the one that I picked because I've been wanting a bandana mask for so long, so it seems like a great choice. But then I realized you probably can't quite hear me as well if I have it on with the headphones and the microphone and all the other parts. Okay. And they're structural enough that you can pull them down around your chinny chin when you need them to. You can hang them off of the one ear. It's just, I'm really pleased with this design. Like, this one's not even a toot my own horn. It's just like, that all worked out really great. That worked out exactly like I designed it in my head.
And thank you so much for your wonderful instructions too.
For sure.
Very helpful.
For sure. And now, if you've never sewn before, you can't say that anymore because you've definitely done it. I'm about to have my next one. I gathered all my stitches all at once. Dun, 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 dun. There we go. It's gonna be so good. Double mask party.
I was kind of thinking about how some of those masks have like the little plasticky thingy that lets you press it and pull it to adjust like your straps. And I was wondering, like, in the spirit of creative reuse, could like little soda can tabs serve the same purpose? Or like, I don't know, I was just thinking.
Wait, for across your nose or for somewhere else?
No, like on the back of the straps to like pull them tighter or looser and adjust.
Huh. Honestly, half the time I grab a clothespin when I'm sitting at my desk. I've got a handful of clothespins in my drawer and I just pinch them together, which is not very cool, but it could work. I have in front of me some paper clips because that's what I use for the nose wires. So I know what you're talking about, building a ladder lock out of it, but I'm wondering if you could use like the hooks of the paper clip to make a ladder lock out of it as well. One way or the other way, whether they're laced through this way or they're laced through up, down, through the lengthwise of them.
Yeah, that's
like
too.
Yeah, I like your soda can idea. I'm wondering if the abrasive edges on them would end up eating through your straps at some point, but like try it, figure it out. There's got to be something that would work really nicely for that. I like where your head is.
I wonder if one of those, the little things that holds together bread bags, is that one of the things you mentioned, Shar? That could like potentially, because I feel like if you need more space, that's one issue, and then if you need it to be tighter, that would be a different one, where maybe one of those plastic like bagel bag things could do it.
Yeah, I didn't say that, but that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, that does sound really good. We actually, at the front, at the entrance of our shop, where we have, sanitizer and a few freebie masks in case folks come in without one, we also have a little bin of safety pins. And so this mask, particularly on my head right now, does not work this way. But a lot of my masks, because the straps are really, really stretchy, they're made out of another spandex material, basically. They're really stretchy, and so if I hang them on my ears, I still get a little gap right here. And so I put them together in the back and use the safety pin as if it's like a little teeny tiny carabiner, and you can clip them together, and that holds things really nicely. And so when folks come in and they're like, "Hi, I'm here," and you're like, "Dude, I can see your nostrils. You definitely don't have this on your face properly," we can offer them a safety pin to pull things tighter around behind. And actually, even most of the masks that I was selling in the shop came with a safety pin for a while.
How's it going, McKenna?
I'm stitches. I'm super slow, but I'm getting there.
Totally reasonable. Totally reasonable. Should we take a picture of folks sewing and also stitching? I mean, sewing and or wearing them? Would that
Sure.
work?
I think
Yeah.
for time's sake, probably just because we reached an hour and a half.
Okay, let's do that. Let's here. I'll keep fake stitching so I can join the party on both parties. So if you are wearing your mask, pull that on. If you are stitching, show that. And Bridget, are you taking our picture?
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can do a screen grabby kind of thing.
Okay.
And if that doesn't work, we'll troubleshoot. But
Okay.
use all of my technical capabilities here.
Amazing. Y'all look fantastic. This is a wonderful thing.
All right, let's see. 1 second. All right, I'm gonna do one more, and I'll count it down this time. I think I found a good way to do it. All right, ready?
Yep.
Oh wait, just kidding. It freezes when I hit the thing. So let's see.
I think I got us one. I think I grabbed one.
Let's do one more for in 3, 2, 1.
There we go. Amazing.
All right.
That is the most comfortable mask I have ever worn. Like it feels like a
Hooray!
pajama mask. Yeah,
And you made it yourself.
exactly.
And you've got instructions to do it again. That's wonderful. That makes me happy.
Like
Very cool,
wearing
team.
a fitted sheet on your face.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like a fitted sheet, but yeah, it's super comfy. And Kaylee's right; these are amazing for the double masking, especially. You put your like super snug one underneath, whatever kind that is, and then this thing on top, and you're just like, I'm invincible. I've got all the layers. Not real invincible, but you know. But yeah, it's nice. It's a good design. We're pretty stoked. Those of you who are still stitching, if you have questions, if you're like, oh no, I got this far and then it didn't work, I will put my email in the chat. You can send pictures. If you're like, I'm stuck, whatever. If you want to send a picture with a question at some point, I'll be, doing things for a while so I can give you answers. And if y'all have any questions along the way, feel free to reach out to us and definitely come see us at the Octopus.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks
Well,
y'all
thank
for
you so
coming.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking with us.
Sure. Okay. Rock and roll, folks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye. Thank you.